I was being brought to set in a wheelchair. Like, I couldn't walk that far. So I had to tell everybody because I needed help. You know, I needed someone to help me stand, and I needed someone to help. I needed someone to help me to get there.
In August 2024, Christina Applegate sat down across from a man who played her father on television for 11 years. And for the first time in a long time, fans got to hear what that relationship actually sounds like off the soundstage. The reunion happened on Applegate's podcast, Messy, which she co-hosts with fellow actress Jamie Lynn Sigler. Both women live with multiple sclerosis, and the show has become a place where Applegate speaks more freely than she ever did during her acting career. When Ed O'Neill walked into that conversation, something shifted. This wasn't a junket interview built around promoting a project. This was two people who had known each other for nearly 4 decades, talking like family. What came out of that episode and the months around it paints a far more grounded and human picture than the rumor mill usually allows. There's no scandal here, no hidden falling out, no secret betrayal waiting to be uncovered. What there is instead is something rarer, a long, complicated, deeply real relationship between two people who grew up and grew old in the same strange industry and who never let go of each other. Christina Applegate was 15 years old when she was cast as Kelly Bundy on Married, with children in 1987. Ed O'Neill, already an experienced actor in his early 40s, played her father, Al Bundy. The show ran on Fox for 11 seasons, until 1997, and became one of the most provocative sitcoms of its era, a deliberate inversion of the wholesome family comedy, built on crude jokes, dysfunction, and a willingness to offend. Applegate has said she did not even want the job at first. She has described watching the pilot with her mother and being startled by how funny O'Neill and Katie Sagal were together, even as she initially resisted the idea of joining the cast. She ended up auditioning almost as a formality, already half convinced she wanted the part after seeing what O'Neill and Sagal had built. What followed was 11 years on a set together, years that took Applegate from being a teenager to being a woman in her mid-20s. During the Messy reunion, she put it simply, O'Neill raised her. If there's anything people like about her, she said, that's on him. If there's anything they don't like, that's on him too. It's a joke. But it's also not really a joke. It's how she now frames the scale of his influence on who she became. That kind of language, describing him as the one who raised her, is not the language people typically use about a co-star. It's the language of family. And it lines up with something O'Neill himself has said over the years in separate interviews, that he came to see Applegate not just as a scene partner, but as someone he was responsible for in some quiet, unspoken way, simply because of how young she was when they started. It's worth being honest about what Married, with children, actually asked of Christina Applegate as a kid. Kelly Bundy was written as a ditzy, hypersexualized teenage character, dressed in revealing outfits, the target of constant jokes about her intelligence and her body. Applegate was a real 15-year-old playing this role in front of a live studio audience, on a show that was deliberately testing the limits of what network television could get away with. It is not hard to imagine how that environment could have gone badly for a young performer without anyone experienced looking out for her. What the record shows, through Applegate's own later comments, is that O'Neill took that responsibility seriously, even though nobody required him to. He was not her legal guardian. He was not a producer with authority over the set. He was simply a 40-something actor who decided that the teenager playing his daughter deserved an adult in her corner. This is a part of their relationship that tends to get exaggerated into something more dramatic than it needs to be. Stories about him personally shielding her from every uncomfortable moment. Scripted scenes protection that play better as television than as fact. The more accurate picture, based on what both of them have actually said publicly, is quieter than that. It's a steady presence. It's an actor with 2 decades more experience than his co-star, treating her with consistent respect and care over a very long stretch of time, in an industry not always known for either. By the time Married, with children, ended its run, Applegate was 26. She had spent more than a third of her life on that set. The show shaped her sense of comic timing, her work ethic, and, by her own account, a great deal of who she is as a person. During the 2024 podcast reunion, she credited O'Neill specifically with teaching her how to bring comedic elements into a performance, framing him not just as a co-star, but as someone who actively taught her the craft. That teaching dynamic is consistent with how O'Neill has talked about his own approach to acting over the years. A performer who came up through a more theatrical, improvisational tradition, comfortable thinking on his feet. Married, with Children gave its cast more room to experiment with line delivery and physical comedy than many sitcoms of the era allowed. And Applegate has talked about how much of what audiences loved about the show came out of that freedom. Bits and running gags that developed organically rather than being handed down fully formed from the writer's room. What's notable is how the relationship didn't stay frozen in that mentor-and-student dynamic. As the seasons went on, Applegate became a more confident performer in her own right, contributing ideas, holding her own creatively. The show's 11-season run is unusually long for any sitcom, and part of what sustained it, by the account of people who worked on it, was a genuine chemistry between a cast that had effectively become a found family over the years they spent together. The show's success was never guaranteed, and at one point it came close to being canceled entirely. Not because of falling ratings, but because of public backlash. In 1989, a Michigan homemaker named Terry Ricalta watched an episode and was offended enough to organize a boycott campaign, contacting major advertisers directly and appearing on national news programs to argue the show was indecent. Several large companies, including some of the show's biggest advertisers, pulled their sponsorship in response. For a moment, the controversy looked like it might end the series. Instead, the publicity had the opposite effect. Curiosity about the show spiked, ratings climbed, and Married, with Children ended up more popular after the boycott than before it. The cast, including a teenage Applegate, lived through that period of genuine uncertainty about whether their show and their jobs would survive a national controversy built around their work. It's the kind of experience that, by nature, either fractures a cast or bonds them. In this case, by every account from the people who lived through it, it bonded them. When Married, with Children ended in 1997, there was no farewell season, no special finale built to give the characters or the actors closure. It simply stopped. And according to Applegate, the cast didn't even get a heads up from the network. She has said publicly that she learned the show had been canceled secondhand, through a chain of people connected to her own assistant at the time. O'Neill has echoed the same frustration, recalling that it took roughly 6 months before anyone at the network formally acknowledged the ending to the cast, and that there was no real send-off to mark 11 years of work. He's joked since then about asking a network executive, half seriously, whether the cast might get something nice on their way out the door, the kind of gift another classic sitcom's cast had reportedly received when their show wrapped, only to never receive anything at all. Neither actor has described the ending as devastating exactly, but both have been candid that it left something unresolved. 11 years is a long time to spend with the same group of people, building something that mattered to millions of viewers, only to have it end with a phone call from a stranger instead of a proper goodbye. What it didn't do was end the relationship between Applegate and O'Neill. They stayed in each other's lives. They worked together again on other projects in the years that followed, including a film and a television series. And as Applegate described it during their 2024 reunion, the friendship eventually became something different from what it had been when she was a teenager on a set. Relationship between two adults who could talk on the phone for hours, who could laugh together, who had simply known each other long enough that the line between co-star and family had stopped matching. In August 2021, Christina Applegate announced publicly that she had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a chronic disease affecting the central nervous system that can impact mobility, balance, and cognitive function, and for which there is no cure. The diagnosis had come a few months earlier, while she was filming the final season of her Netflix series Dead to Me. Applegate has been unusually open in describing what the disease has taken from her. She's spoken about needing a cane to walk, about cognitive fog that makes certain tasks harder than they used to be, about gaining weight from inactivity and medication, and not recognizing herself anymore. In interviews since the diagnosis, she's described the disease in blunt terms, saying there's no good day with MS, only days that are less bad than others. She's also said she doesn't know whether she'll work on camera again, and that by mid-2023 she suspected her role on Dead to Me might end up being her last major acting job. This is where her relationship with O'Neill has continued to show up, not through any single dramatic gesture, but through consistency. During the messy reunion, Applegate referenced the fact that O'Neill had been there with her through difficult periods that had nothing to do with the show, including her mother's battle with cancer. That's not the kind of detail an actor brings up about a former co-star. They're simply being polite to. It's the kind of detail that points to an actual ongoing friendship, the sort that survives long after the cameras stop rolling and the contract expire. Applegate's public reappearances after her diagnosis have become some of the more striking moments of recent award show history, not because of anything scripted, but because of how directly she chose to face her illness in public rather than disappear from view. In November 2022, she received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, her first major public appearance since revealing her diagnosis, arriving with cane and surrounded by friends and former castmates who came out to support her. Then, at the rescheduled 75th Primetime Emmy Awards in January 2024, Applegate walked out onto the stage with her cane, escorted by host Anthony Anderson, to the sound of the Married, with children-themed song playing the cast into the room one more time. The entire crowd stood and applauded for nearly a minute. Visibly emotional, Applegate handled the moment the way she's handled most of her public life since the diagnosis, with humor sharp enough to cut through the sentimentality. She told the crowd they were shaming her by standing up for her disability, then cracked a dry joke about her body not being the product of a popular weight loss drug, before asking the audience, only half joking, to stop applauding every time she did something. The room laughed through what was clearly also a very emotional moment for everyone watching. It would be easy to flatten that night into a tidy, inspirational story, but Applegate has consistently refused that framing in her own words. She's described living with MS as something closer to ongoing grief for a body and a future she no longer has, rather than a battle she's triumphantly winning. What the Emmys moment showed, more than triumph, was a woman choosing to be seen exactly as she is, in front of an industry that doesn't always make room for that kind of honesty.